Americans for Limited Government. One of the things we're talking about in Washington, D.C. is talking about is the red wave. What's going on? What are people seeing? What are people hearing? What are the pollsters finding out? And are the polls accurate? One of the things that we know to be true is that this election, under normal circumstances, an off-year election, where the president's party generally gets creamed in the midterm elections. And the Democrats and Joe Biden have given the public no reason not to reject them in 2022. We saw a little bump in the summer that showed that the Democrats might be mitigating some of the gains the Republicans were expecting to make. But that bump is over. It is over. And we're seeing it not just in states where, would be traditional, what people would think of as battleground states, but we're seeing in states that surprise at least DC pundits. I'll tell you, I'm not surprised by some of them, but the DC pundits are. And they're surprised because, quite honestly, they don't think about things very much. They get into patterns. They don't understand how and patterns are all that matter, and they don't really think about trend lines and the like. But so there's a lot going on out there. Let's talk about some very specific things. First of all, what I wanted to get with is sorry, I got distracted. I was trying to see if the comments were on. On a national level, we're seeing that the what is known as the generic ballot, that's the ballot that says if you were going to vote for a Republican or a Democrat, who would you vote for? Okay, it's very, it's binary. It takes the name of the candidate out. It takes name ID out. It's just saying, would you vote for the Republican or the Democrat? And right now, the numbers are, the ABC News poll anyway shows about 5% lead for Republicans, and that's pretty unusual. That generic ballot means that independents are overwhelmingly going to the Republican candidates, since Democrats typically have about a 5 to 7 point advantage over Republicans in voter registration. So what we're seeing are independents who are making a choice right now are tipping toward the Republicans. Now, many people would say that, well, we're still 6 weeks out, Rick, so it's a little premature to be talking about this. But the fact is, balloting is going to be starting to happen right now. We'll begin to see mail-out ballots, absentee requests, and the like being in the mail as we speak. It's throughout October, and if they're not already in your mailbox. So the election's begun. The minute the ballots start getting mailed, the election has begun. And so the people who want to vote, can't wait to vote, are going to be sending in ballots now. And so campaigning has to be, has really been altered, because it used to be you husbanded your resources to the last 3 weeks of the campaign, and then you poured in your resources last 3 weeks, because that was when the decisions were made. But the fact is, what we learned in 2020, what many voters learned in 2020 anyway, is if you vote for a candidate and then you discover 2 weeks later that candidate is I'm talking about Joe Biden here, that the Hunter Biden tape comes out, for instance, the laptop comes out, and you learn all sorts of new information that you hadn't been exposed to about the candidate. If you've already voted, there's no do-overs, there's no take-backs. Your vote has been cast. And so so it'd be interesting to see if voters are as anxious to bank their votes early this year as they have been in the past, because the truth of the matter is, the earlier you vote, the less information you're going to be able to get about candidates and about different negatives that might come out. Recognizing that negatives late in the campaign have to be viewed with a certain amount of skepticism, because there's less time to be able to check them out. And so a lot of times the stuff that you can't, as campaign managers would say, the stuff you can't really get to fly early because it gets vetted and fact checked in a legitimate way. You can get to fly later because there's less capacity to respond. So that's just kind of old California, kind of trickeration that you do as a campaign manager. But the fact of the matter is, voting is happening now. So what we look at this generic flipping, Democrats are flipping out over it. Democrats are sitting there and going, wait a second, we're in huge trouble. All of their nightmares are coming to fruition, and couldn't happen to a nicer group of people. It's not just at the it's not just on a national level, which is kind of amorphous, but we're seeing races that that are plus 8 for Democrats, plus 10 for Democrats are now competitive. They're extremely competitive. And so that means a race that you would sit there and you normally say, well, that candidate, the Republican, doesn't have a chance in that race. In this election cycle, that Republican does have a chance. That Republican has it's a toss-up at that point. And I don't really care what the Real Clear Politics people say or the various pundits like Charlie Cook or those guys, because here's what the dirty little secret about Charlie Cook and those guys, all the pundits here in town are. They're dependent upon the same information that everybody else is. They're being fed garbage by the Democratic Congressional Committee and by the National Republican Congressional Committee, and they're always the last people to get on board with a wave and what that means, because it kind of dissolves all their expectations, everything that they've grown up to know to be true. And so consequently, the pundits are oftentimes the last people to actually figure out what's going on. But eventually they do and have to admit that they were wrong. But the fact is, don't look at them 6 weeks out and expect them to know much. They don't know any more than anybody else. What I do think is true is that you're looking at a circumstance where Republican voters are much more likely to come out. The Trump voters are much more likely to come out. And what the polling firm Trafalgar believes is that is not only in the past, there have been Trump voters were reluctant to self-identify. And so they were called shy Trump voters by Trafalgar. And the reason they were reluctant to self-identify was because they got attacked. And they weren't going to just tell a random person they're a Trump voter because the fact is, they would be that was putting them at risk. And that was in 2016. Remember, so this whole idea of political intimidation, something the Democrats have been doing for a while. And so Trafalgar kind of teased out that there were shy Trump voters and the polls were undercounting Trump voters as a result. And the voters were literally just lying to pollsters because of that. And we're able to kind of tease out what the results were. And we're one of the few polling firms that called that Trump would win. And so now they're saying in 2022, because of Joe Biden's attack on Republicans, like anybody who voted for Trump, Trafalgar now believes that there's something called a shy Republican voter. So people aren't even willing to identify as Republican because they don't want to end up having a problem in their workplace and the like. And that's and that's a pretty serious charge that political intimidation by the federal government is causing voters to actually respond by being much less likely to tell the truth to a pollster. But that's what Trafalgar believes based on their polling. What polling is showing is in places like unexpected others, but places the Nevada Senate is in deep trouble, down 3 to 4 points in Nevada to Laxalt, to a guy named I think it's Paul Laxalt, son of Paul Laxalt anyway, former Republican senator from Nevada. And so Adam Laxalt, I'm sorry, he's the attorney general of the state. And Adam Laxalt is leading Ocasio-Cortez. Most people didn't have that on their radar screen. But I will tell you, having some close friends in Nevada who work politics in Nevada. Nevada's electorate is mad. They are really, really mad. And a lot of the power brokers in Nevada are mad. And they're mad because the governor, Sistek, the Democrat, shut down their entire industry, shut down Las Vegas for quite a long time, well beyond what other people were doing, and closed the Speedway, for instance. And so they lost a race, a NASCAR race. Vegas was deserted because during COVID, and the attack by the government in Nevada on the way Nevadans make money has created a different environment. It's made it harder for the Democrats to be able to get the union voters to be as enthusiastic for them, because they lost their jobs too. They weren't working also. So there's a backlash to Sistek. Now, Sistek is only down by two to 3 points to the Republican opponent in the state, but Sistek is down in Nevada. And so I think we're seeing a lot of those kind of circumstances where how the governor kind of handled COVID and the shutdown is now there's a backlash. Did they shut down the schools? Did they require masks in schools? Did they destroy children's education based upon fear? And did they play footsie so concerned about what the teachers union said that they didn't care about what common sense said, and they sacrificed kids' education as a result? That's a very local concern. And it's a local concern that Democrat governors are having to deal with, because they're the ones who actually have to eat the fruit of parents who ordinarily might sit out or might vote Democrat, but their kids have now been affected by the COVID overreaction and the draconian actions taken to force vaccinations of children and everything else. And so there's a whole lot of people who ordinarily might vote Democrat, but in this election cycle, because of all the stuff that's happened, they've got a pretty good, been given a pretty good reason not to. And those people are coming out to vote. So just understand, people who have been aggrieved by the government, have been seeing their children abused, and are seeing what's going on in this country, and that directly affects their kids, that actually affects politics in their household, affects the well-being of their children, their ability to have been with their loved ones when they died, before they died in a hospital, through the isolation chambers. What we have is the classic situation where big government has become the dog in a lot of individuals' laps. It's no longer some esoteric thing. It is now, big government has made itself real. And these people have sat there and who've been affected, and they're mad. And now's their chance to have a say-so. They're not coming to rallies, but they're going to come to vote. They're not voting for the captors. They're not voting for their captors, the unreasonable Faucis of the world, who thought it was better to destroy their children's future and their ability to have an education and to have any semblance of a normal life, and sacrifice their children on the altar of COVID. And those parents are coming back, and they're coming out to vote, and they're going to vote and vote and vote. In fact, the ABC News poll that we've talked about in the past, came out this past weekend, shows that education was actually the number 2 issue of concern behind the economy. And 77% of the people called education a very high concern. And so it was the number 2 issue. And I strongly suspect that these people aren't talking about school testing and things like that. Education is a concern because the education system has become out of control, and the education system has become actually something that's at odds with their own children's education. So we've got that movement going on, the parents' movement that's going on, the moms' movement that's going on the education front, that transcends a lot of other boundaries. We have and we saw that, by the way, in 2021 with the Glenn Youngkin election for Virginia governor, where that issue drove a lot of voters and was in fact one of the primary reasons why Youngkin was able to win in an upset victory in Virginia in 2021. The So we've got states like, once again, Nevada, which the Democrats did not count as a state they could lose. That they didn't think they could lose. They thought it was a limited chance they could lose it. If all went badly, they could lose it. Well, right now it looks like they're going to lose Nevada. You can't count your chickens till they hatch, but Nevada's looking bad for them. You have states like Arizona, and in Arizona, you have a gubernatorial race, and the candidates um, are Carrie Lake, who's a former newscaster who's basically taken on the establishment on both sides, and you have a Katie Hobbs, and Katie Hobbs is the Secretary of State who certified the election mess as a partisan Secretary of State, and she's now running for governor. So you have a pretty strict contrast. Right now, Lake is up in that race, I think by 3 points. But there's really no compromise there. We're not talking about a McCain Republican in Carrie Lake. We're talking somebody who was a news broadcaster, who quit being a news broadcaster because she was just appalled by what she was being asked to read, and very publicly quit, saying, I'm not going to read stuff that's not true. So she's actually put her livelihood, what she has done for a living for her entire life, and said, I can't do that anymore because what I'm being told I have to read, I don't believe is true. And so we have an instance of somebody who stood up and put literally their livelihood on the line, is now running for governor, and somebody who's very familiar with the politics and the issues in Arizona because they've been covering them for years and years and years. She survived a primary and now is leading Katie Hobbs. And here's the interesting part. Katie Hobbs, the Democrat, who's actually trailing, is refusing to debate the Republican, Carrie Lake, because she doesn't want to debate conspiracy theorists. She refuses to debate conspiracy theorists. How about that for crazy? So the strange thing here is, and this is a trend that's going on across the country, the Democrats are actually refusing to debate their Republican opponents, whether it be in Pennsylvania, it's Arizona. This is happening in at least 5 different states. And they're doing that all saying, well, I'm not going to share the stage with these people because it gives them credibility. Well, I'm old enough to remember when debating your opponent was kind of like you have a debate and then the public can decide, and you sit there and you go up and you exchange views and you disagree, and then the public says, okay, well, I like that one, I don't like that one. And the objective was to convince the 7 to 10% who are undecided about who they're going to pick. By the Democrat nominees not choosing to debate, they're telling the American public, I don't trust you to be able to discern the truth. And oh, by the way, could there be more of a threat to democracy than candidates who refuse to even face their opponents in an election? I don't think so. So it's so we've got this kind of normative thing that's happening right now, where like Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman, basically Fetterman hasn't been willing to debate Oz. And it's one of the stranger things, because Fetterman's actually been in state government. Fetterman's actually, his whole appeal is, I know the state of Pennsylvania and Oz doesn't. And yet he's not willing to get up and defend his point of view and his positions in front of the public. Part of it's because the guy doesn't, I think I don't think he is ill. And so and because he's ill, he may not have the energy to be able to do that. And which is a problem, because quite honestly, you actually have to have some energy to be a senator. But you're also seeing it occur in the Pennsylvania governor's race, where the state senator, who's the Republican nominee, is more than willing to debate, But the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, who's the Democrat nominee, is saying, no, I don't want to talk about the issues facing the people of the state of Pennsylvania or Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But so we're seeing a lot of that, a lot of fear on the part of the Democrats in terms of debating. I'm going to give you one little thing to watch for, and I'm going to take a look at the comments. One of the things that I as we're moving forward, look at the governor's races. Okay, everybody's going to focus on the Senate races and to some extent the House races, but look at the governor's races, because I argued in 2020 that after the elections in 2020, the single most important thing that happened to lose the 2020 election was the election of the Democrat governors in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and those three states, because those governors ended up being leading, and with them, Democrat secretaries of state who certified ballots. The governors and the secretaries of state and control the state house in states in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. Those who gets elected to those positions will matter in terms of voter integrity going into 2024 and laws to make certain that we only have eligible people voting in 2024. So when you want to look at a midterm, you want to look at what impact is it going to have on the presidential 2 years out. And the governor elections will have a huge impact, and did have a huge impact in 2018, and will have a huge impact in 2022 going to 2024, because those elections what dictate what kind of laws, voter integrity laws, you can get passed. And so we have an opportunity to pay attention to those races, because if Wisconsin's gubernatorial race flips, and right now the Republicans slightly ahead, and Senator Ron Johnson wins in his return to the Senate, that's huge, because ultimately a governor has to sign legislation that the Wisconsin legislature passes. And so if the legislature passes a strong voter identification bill, and the governor won't sign it, then it doesn't do it good. But if the governor is willing to sign that and is a proponent of it, you essentially will create an environment where the Wisconsin elections will be more secure, more honest. And same thing with Pennsylvania, same thing with Michigan. And if we get fair and honest elections in those states, I think we're in going into 2024, there's a much greater chance that a pro-liberty candidate will be able to win the presidency, given the map that Donald Trump has laid out, whether that candidate is Donald Trump or somebody else. And I'm not walking away from Donald Trump as candidate. I just can't assume he's going to be the candidate. So that's so that's kind of something to look at. And I'll talk a little bit about the congressional races here in a second, but let me look at some of these questions. Let me see, I'm going to do this longer one. We have to get rid of these Zuckerberg ballot deposit boxes on our streets, stores. Yeah, Levon Thornton, you were 100% right. The stores corrupt nonprofits and their mules love them. They must go. Maybe we can yank them out and stack them in front of Zuckerberg's house. Well, that's I had thought about yanking them out and sticking them in front of his house, but the lack of security, lack of ballot security, is a primary concern. It's the problem with mail ballots. Let me just give you an example. In the city of Los Angeles, or in LA County, Los Angeles County, in 2020, or before 2020, Tom Fitton's group, Judicial Watch, sued LA County, urging them to clean up their ballots, clean up their voter registration list. LA County agreed in court that they would get rid of, they would knock off 1.5 million voters off of their lists after the presidential election. Astonishingly, when the votes came out and were finally tallied in 2020, which in California it takes about 2.5 months. But when they were finally finalized, in LA County, about 1.5 million people didn't vote. So apparently, every single person, other than the ones who'd been certified to be ineligible, voted in LA County. And if you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. That every single person voted in LA County. We have to get rid of the drop boxes. We have to get rid of most mail ballots. We want our elections to be secure. We want the actual ballot to be secure and only be run through a certified chain of custody. And the challenge with what's happening with the ballot drop boxes off in the middle of out in the middle of the street, on nowhere near anywhere, and basically people just driving up and dumping off 20, 30, 40 ballots, is we don't know where those ballots came from. We don't know if those ballots were legitimately obtained, if those ballots were essentially harvested from mailboxes of people where they arrived in the mail and somebody came back, stole the mail and stole the ballots. There was a video of that Project Veritas did last election out of Minnesota, out of Ilhan Omar's district in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where there was a guy who was riding around with hundreds of ballots in his car. And, he had a bunch of empty ballots that he was riding around in his car. Well, I'm sorry, but when one guy gets 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 ballots, it's the concept of one person, one vote gets really blown away. So yeah, we have to keep chain of custody of our ballots. We have to make it so people have to show ID when they vote. We have to make it so when the election is done, win or lose, both sides are able to say, that election was fairly held. I remember pictures from Afghanistan when the first time they voted in Afghanistan, you had people coming out with purple ink on their thumbs, indicating they had voted. Well, in 2020, in the election of 2020, if that standard had been upheld here in America, the Democrats would have claimed that it was voter suppression to require people to actually have a demonstrating mark that they had voted as an individual so they couldn't vote twice. So let's try to restore one person, one vote. So I agree with you that this is a problem. We have to get rid of it. In Arizona, the Zuck Bucks are illegal, but they're not illegal in Wisconsin. They're not illegal in a lot of places because the Democrat governors wouldn't allow them to be illegal. Winning those governorships will allow us to eliminate Zuck Bucks out of the vote counting process and help restore the one vote, one person principle. Let's see. Jonathan Johnson, Democrats are destroying America. They're cooked. Joe Biden will soon face indictments. Well, I can tell you this. I can tell you I'm hopeful that the Democrats are cooked politically and that there's an overwhelming wave. But Joe Biden is going to be indicted by his attorney general. So a wave of I don't have much hope for a wave of indictment. And given how I hate to say this, but I don't hold that much hope for Joe Biden getting indicted. I don't even think, I don't even have hope that they'll actually open up Hunter Biden's laptop to find out what's in it. Because the fact of the matter is the people who are running the federal prosecutorial system, pretty corrupt, and it's a problem. And it's a problem we have to address, and we'll have to make a decision of whether or not we want to fix it, or do we want to have a big fight where the Joe Biden should have to should go to jail. And I expect the Republicans will likely take a hard look at the Hunter Biden laptop and may move for impeachment in the House over it and other things that are happening. But truthfully, the Democrats will fall on their sword on this. They're not going to allow him to be impeached. And it's going to become so. We do need to do that because we need to try to restore some integrity in the system. But sorry, but I'm just I've watched too many of these things have the ball pulled away by Lucy and feel like Charlie Brown trying to kick a field goal. And the Department of Justice is Lucy, and we keep seeing stuff happen. And I just don't want to be Durhamed again. Let's see what else we got. I don't have any idea what some of this is. Yeah, I'll put it this. Karen, thank you very much for the note. Yeah, we're gonna be doing this pretty regularly. And not just talking about the elections. I want to take this chance to say that, and I've said this before, but I'm not going to stop. I was on the radio this morning in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and a pretty regular gig I do on once or twice a week in La Crosse, and I kind of may have gotten the host Mike Hayes into trouble, and I apologize, Mike, if you're out there watching. I apologize because normally I don't do any. I try to stay away from partisan stuff, but the bottom line is this country is dependent upon us winning this election. And so I took the time, his air, to basically do a 6-minute commercial urging his listeners to go to their inboxes and get their friends, their neighbors, people who are like-minded, to make sure they are registered to vote. Make sure they are registered to vote. You'd be shocked. An amazing number of people who you go to church with aren't registered to vote, have opted out of the system, don't do anything. Those are people who you know, and just casually ask, hey, I'm registered to vote. Are you registered to vote if you haven't had the conversation? Because it matters. And be prepared to provide them with a voter registration opportunity, a voter registration card that they can fill out and submit, because it is too hard to restore freedom in this country if the people who most want freedom to be restored are sitting on the sidelines because they don't want to do jury duty or some reason like that. So let's make sure our friends are registered to vote now. We have a short time to get that done. And then let's make sure they get to vote. Okay, yeah, I'm registered to vote, but I really don't know much about it. I'm really not involved. Be the messenger. Be the person who gets them to the polls. Help cut the wheat from the chaff. It's people let me just explain how this works. There'll be about 1,000 to 10,000 people who see this video. Okay, depending on how it goes. But we've been getting about 10,000 people viewing some part of the video. So if 10,000 people see this video, if those 10,000 people all just reach out to their contact list and they all just get 3 people to register to vote, because they ask, hey, if you're not registered to vote, let me help you. Okay, 3 people, because they are an influencer on those people's lives. We don't need Kim Kardashian to be an influencer. You are an influencer on your friends' lives. So be the influencer. Register to vote and get out to vote. And help them, if they haven't been paying attention, if they aren't registered and they just say, hey, I haven't done this in the past, help them overcome kind of the roadblocks so that they become an active voter. Because folks, and you'll be surprised who isn't voting. Only 70% of the people in a high turnout election, only 70% of the people who are registered vote. And only about half of Americans are registered. So you get down to it, if you have 70% of Americans registered and you only have 70% of them vote, well, at that point, we're sitting there. It's our fault if we're not getting like-minded people registered and participating and voting. I don't care if the Democrats don't vote, but we have to do our job and vote. And that's by and the best thing you can do, 10,000 people, register three people, that's 30,000 people registered. If those people all vote, that means you have increased the turnout by 30,000 people. And in some of these races are going to be won by, hundreds of votes, if not dozens of votes. Some of the races are going to be very tight. The races that we're going to win that people don't expect, they're going to be very tight. And it'll be the difference between were you able to get were the people who cared able to get their friends to register and then vote. So don't discover on November 9th that your candidate, your district lost by 7 votes, and and you've got 5 friends who basically didn't vote, and go out and get them to vote, and just do what you need to do, because ultimately nobody's an influencer for your friends like you are. I'm going to go on and let's see here and do some more of these. All that says to me is the Democrats know they're in trouble because we the people are sick of their shenanigans. Dina, you are right. People have caught on to them and are sick of their shenanigans. And, I don't think the Biden administration, the person who's their press secretary anyway, has any idea what it means to see your life, the money you've put away for your retirement, see 25% of it go away, and sit there and say, guess what? I was planning on retiring. I can't plan on retiring anytime soon now. Or, or I am retired and I now need to take a hard look at that, whether or not I can stay retired, or do I need to go get a part-time job? Those are real concerns facing real people. I don't think they've got any idea of what happens when people go into the grocery store, people making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, and they're going to the grocery store and they see the price of tomatoes up, they see the price of milk up, they see the price of cereal up, they see the price of every single thing they buy to feed their family up, and they sit there and they look at the shelves, and sometimes they're empty and they don't know why. The psychological impact of constantly rising prices, along with episodic empty shelves, tells every single person that something is dramatically wrong, that the system is failing. And whether or not the Biden administration has the amount of awareness to understand this or not, it is their failure. They're the ones who are in charge of the country. There's not something they can do on all of it. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that baby formula still isn't available, is behind lock and key in most places, and you have virtually kind of bare shelves with baby formula. The fact that baby formula still isn't available after all this time, 9 months, is absurd. It's absurd. Parents are sitting scrambling around trying to get baby formula for their babies, are sitting there saying, and the people who are supposed to make this stuff work are failing. They're not, or for their own life, personal life. This isn't esoteric, is creating problems that for them, and they is to say, no more. You failed, and to give the other guys a chance at the ball. Excuse me. So, so that's so those are some of the things. In politics, there's kind of a saying, and I don't know how widespread this thing is. I learned it at a consulting firm I worked for when I was a kid. Well, maybe not kid, but some point in my life. And the saying is, if there's a dog fight on the street, and you're inside, you might get up and look out the windows, see what's going on. If there's a dog fight on your porch, you're going to go to the porch, but you're not going outside. You're not getting involved in it. But if the dog fights in your lap, you have to deal with it. And the problem the Democrats have is inflation. The voters' lap. The formula shortage is in the voters' lap. Empty shelves are in the voters' lap. The unavailability of new cars is in the voters' lap. Every single issue that's confronting our country right now is in our trend Republican, perhaps with the exception of abortion. And each one of those issues are issues that are deeply felt by people who are affected. So it's no longer a thing where you say, well, I'm kind of concerned about the economy, but it's not really a driver. No, people are concerned about the economy, are coming out to vote. And the spread on the economy, according to the ABC Washington Post poll, is about 50% of the people sit there in economy. 17% more say the Republicans are best to deal with it. On inflation, 16% more say the Republicans are the ones best to deal with it. So we're looking at a circumstance where the dog in the lap is going to work against the incumbent party in a big way. And that, my friends, is why there's going to be a red wave. But the size of the wave, as I've said before, the size of the wave is directly based on what you do with your contact lists. So let's make this a really, really, really big wave, because the difference, Newt Gingrich is saying there could be a 20 to 70 seat Republican pickup in the House. I don't know where he comes up with 70, but it's a pretty big number. But the fact of the matter is, if there's a 70 seat Republican pickup in the House, that is, you almost have the capacity at that point to override a veto in the House. You have the capacity to push real policy and insist that if you want to fund the government, insist that things change, that we take control of the budgeting process, of the appropriations process, and stop the Biden administration's crazy edicts that they're doing from a regulatory basis and from a legal basis. We can put an end to a vast majority of the stuff that the Biden administration is attempting to do if the Republicans have an overwhelming victory in the House, simply by the House saying, we will not pass a funding bill unless these 10 things are fixed. And we're going to prohibit those 10 things from occurring. And we're going to force the Biden administration to play within the law and to follow the law and to start enforcing the immigration laws. Those are the kind of things that can happen, but you have to have the big wave to get them done, because otherwise everybody in Washington, D.C. will look at each other and say, oh, we got to wait till next year, till the next election, till there's a presidential election to do anything. No, you want to get stuff done. Make certain that wave is as big as possible, and tell the people you're sending back to Washington, D.C. that you expect them to do something, or else don't come back for your vote. That is how we're going to fix things in this country. It's not by being Mr. Nice Guy. And I almost feel like playing Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy going out here. But it's but the fact of the matter is, we're not going to win by being Mr. Nice Guy. We're going to win by electing people who neither side is expecting to be back in Washington, D.C., and having those people be a giant thorn in the side of the leadership on the Republican side, and create a dynamic for the Republican leadership that says we have to deliver, otherwise our powers can be taken away. And oh, by the way, we have to deliver, or else their own conference is going to change leadership. So the more Republicans back here, the more people who they didn't expect to get back here, who are back here saying, because for all the right reasons, because they want to save the country, the more people like Carrie Lake who get elected for Arizona governorship, the more people who come back with a mission that the country's in trouble, and they're coming back not to feather their nest, not to get a little member pin and be able to become a lobbyist someday. They're coming back because they want to save the country from what's been happening to it. The more people like that who we elect, the better chance we have to save the country. And the votes that we need are in your contact list. And with that, I'm going to sign up. I'll look here and see if there's any more that we want to talk about. Here's one that's good. Max Schneider. Katie Hobbs knows that she would get whooped in a debate with Carrie Lake. That's a real reason she won't do it. Yeah, Max, you're right. The challenge is that they're not doing it in like 5 different states. So it is actually a strategy of we're not gonna deign to have a conversation about the future of the state of Arizona, Pennsylvania, the country as a whole, because we don't think the Republican nominee is somebody who should even be a part of the debate. So suddenly the Democrat nominees want to be able to pick the Republican nominee, and maybe that worked when we were busy nominating people like Mitch McConnell, or not Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney. But I think those days are over. Let's go one more. No politicians go to jail unless they're so low on the totem pole. They don't have any real dirt. They're just an example thing. Yeah, it's one of the things you don't want to be is the person who's low enough on the totem pole that they don't care if you're the one who takes the fall. And so you don't want to be that person, or perhaps a DNC staffer who knows too much, walking home from the DNC one night. Not to mention any names. Susan, you're right. They did cheat in 2020. Will they cheat? The Democrats. I always say you have to win by 5 points to beat the Democrats, and so maybe that's too low now. But they'll try to cheat. But bottom line is, let's just overwhelm them. And if we can get a few of those governorships and keep the state legislatures for people who are going to push for voter integrity, we will be able to do things that make certain that 2020 doesn't happen again in 2024. We close some of the availability of being able to cheat, and that's why those gubernatorial races are so important, and why those state house races are so important, because that's where we'll close the loopholes and make it so the Democrats will have to play on a level playing field. And if they have to play on a level playing field, they will get destroyed. Let's see here. Yeah, Michael, this is not an excuse, okay? There's a school of thought, and I was exposed to this school of thought when I was a little kid when Barry Goldwater was running. It's revealing my age a little bit, but you can probably tell from this mug. When Barry Goldwater was running, I can remember I was a little kid, and there was an argument about whether or not, this is when he was in the primary, there was an argument about whether or not you wanted to elect somebody who was quote unquote electable. In that case, it was Nelson Rockefeller from New York. Or did you want to elect somebody, did you want to nominate somebody who actually stood for something? That was Barry Goldwater. In 1964, the Republicans chose at the Cow Palace in San Francisco to nominate somebody who stood for something. Barry Goldwater said very clearly that he would rather be right than be president. And he was both right and he didn't get to be president. The Nelson Rockefeller wing of the party abandoned him and basically said, oh, well, we'll vote for Lyndon Baines Johnson. What can go wrong? Well, apart from Vietnam and 50,000 plus lives lost in Vietnam, apart from setting up the entire uh, social welfare system that's been used to effectively uh, make it so has led to the destruction of the black family structure and is contributing to the destruction of the white family structure right now. Um, apart from the massive expansion of government that led to dependent cycles of dependency, which are extremely difficult to break. Apart from those little things, I guess not much. And it was the Rockefeller Republicans who were the ones responsible for the sweep that occurred in '64 that allowed Johnson to foist policies that are bad for America on our country. Um, we had so there are, that's a reality. Sometimes when the people who are in it for power and less philosophy can't stand somebody who's in it for a philosophical reason. And that's why what we're doing is so important, Americans for Limited Government, because I'm not smart enough to know who's going to win a year out. Don't claim to be. What I am smart enough to know is who's actually telling us the truth, who's going to fight, okay, and be able to discern that. And because we've been doing this a long time, and we know the issues that matter, we know the things that have to be done, and so you kind of you fight for the people who are going to fight for America. And right now, unfortunately, you see people like Abigail Spanberger in Virginia here locally. She's running ads all over the TV. And she's telling us, she's the fifth most bipartisan member of Congress. And she's, and all these conservative things she's fighting for. And the bottom line on it is she's running a campaign that says, oh, I'm a Republican. I'm a safe Democrat. Don't worry about it. I'm a safe Democrat. Trust me. The fact is she is voting with Pelosi all the time, even though she publicly complains about Pelosi. She's providing, the Democrats only had, at one point, 3 vote advantage in the House. Pelosi didn't ever lose any votes because of Spanberger. Every single vote that mattered, Spanberger was with her. And so just don't be fooled. These people will tell you anything to fool you, to be able to continue doing damage to this country. And every single one of them needs to be held accountable and held responsible by the voters at the ballot box and get the opportunity to resume private service, because we just can't put up with a bunch of people who will lie to your face saying how they're standing up for, and they're bipartisan and all this stuff, when in fact, they haven't taken down a single bill, haven't taken any rules. They haven't created, we only needed 3 to 5 Democrats to do that. They have not been part of the solution in terms of stopping this deluge of big government crap that's been jammed down our throat. And to watch those commercials, it makes me want to break the TV screen. So trust me, folks, the incumbent Democrats, not a one of them deserves a pass, because if they'd been able to get 5 Democrats together, they could have stopped anything, and they didn't choose to do that. Enough of my preaching. Sometimes I get mad. Waffle Nephilim. Okay. The name is just Waffle Nephilim. Wow. I might reconsider the name given the Nephilim and who they were. But that's a choice. Let's see here. Lonnie Harrison, election integrity is key to minimizing corruption. Yes. But I believe that it's a wheel with too much torque to stop. With that being said, do you think the damage caused can be reversed? Lonnie, that's a good question. And the answer is yes. In terms of election integrity, if people demand it, it will happen. I believe I've laid out in key states that are going to impact 2024 what has to happen to be able to affect it, to be able to fix it. But ultimately, what we have to do is in places like California, where you're going to have ballot harvesting forever, we have to stand up and say, no, we're not, we have to fight the game. If you're going to have ballot harvesting, then we got to ballot harvest ourselves. Okay. You have to play the game by the rules on the box top. And if you've got rules that say we're going to go collect ballots from everybody, then that's the responsibility to go do that and not just complain about it. Now, if I were in Nevada, for instance, and if we get a Republican governor, a Republican state house in Nevada, one of the first things I would do is I'd take a look and say, hey, did our state give away our electoral college votes to the state of California by passing something that said that we were going to have, if a majority of voters vote for one candidate, that the Nevada state electoral college votes have to be cast for the majority, whatever candidate got the majority. A lot of states did that with Democrat governors and Democrat legislatures, and is essentially throwing away their state's unique vote in the electoral college and giving it away to California, a state which has no voter integrity, which doesn't even clean their voter rules, that mails out ballots to people who don't exist, mails out ballots to people who don't live in the household that they're registered in or moved within the last 20 years ago. And so you've got all these rogue ballots floating around in California. And in fact, you've got more rogue ballots floating around in California than you have actual people voting in Nevada. So if you're in Nevada and your state voted for that, to give away your electoral college votes to a majority, then, and that only goes into effect once a majority of states that comprise enough 270 electoral college votes vote for it, for those states in terms of how they operate, rescind that. So are things that are going to have to be rescinded that have been put into place. And the ballot, the ballot harvesting, and the ballot putting the barrels for ballots to be put out on the streets. If people want to vote in advance, go into the DMV and have a place where they can vote in advance if they want to, if that's something you want to do. But if it were me and I were just apart from military, I would say active military and expats who are all out of the country, I would say, let's do this. Let's have a single voting day, a national election day. Let's call it a national holiday. And let's just say, if you got, you're off work, no excuses, get to the polls. That would actually be a way to do it. And then if there's variances that have to be done for people who are in the hospital and things like that, those things can be done. But by and large, this idea that we're going to just have a bunch of ballots sent out around, live ballots sent to people all over the country, millions and millions of live ballots that are unsecure, that does far more damage to the consent of the governed than trying to figure out what you do with a nursing home in terms of people who are mentally competent, but maybe physically unable to vote. There's some way we can always figure out how to deal with the issues associated with it, but the massive problem of lack of chain of custody on live ballots has to be dealt with in order for there to be any integrity. And quite honestly, you're not going to deal with it in a place like California. You're probably not going to deal with it in a place like Oregon. And so where the elections already started occurring, as we talked before. So let's just be real about it and understand that you can fix the stuff you can fix. Let's get Mark Zuckerberg's money out of buying access to ballots through the Zuckbuck program, where we saw in Green Bay, Wisconsin, a Zuckerberg employee, essentially a hired employee, essentially running the election and having access to ballots before they were counted. And it's just it was such a abusive power that let's put it this way: people in Wisconsin were shocked by it, and it really had an impact on the election. So there are some things that can be done. I think we can clean up the election process. Will it be perfect? No. at the very least, let's take away Zuckerberg's private funds ability to be involved in the election counting and the public sector election responsibility. Let's do that. And let's any state that the Republicans take control of, let's strip away the ability to have those states electoral college votes be compelled to vote for whoever California chooses, because California's elections insecure, and it doesn't do any good to have a secure election in Nevada if you don't have a secure election in California, and California is going to provide the margin to have the Democrat candidate, have a majority. So enough of that stuff. We can go on with this forever. Thank you, Lonnie, for that question. It's a really good one. With that, I'm going to sign off. I hope that we'll continue doing this. And I hope you found this to be interesting and informative. Take a look at one of the things I would do is, if you are looking at giving money to campaigns, okay, give money to campaigns. I strongly urge you not to give money to the party mechanisms, the political party mechanisms. And it's nothing against the political party mechanisms, but essentially you're outsourcing your choice of who gets that money. And there are some Republicans, so I'm confident many of you wouldn't want to get to your money. And so don't fund them. Don't fund the party mechanism. Fund the individual campaigns, do the work, and figure out who they are. And they aren't necessarily the people who the National Republican Congressional Committee has put on their A list. The people who need the money, the people who are going to, if we're going to get a 50-60 vote flip here, it's not going to be the A candidates who win. It's going to be the B and the C level candidates who win. And those B and C level candidates right now are being starved for cash. So take a look. If you've got somebody who's a good candidate who you like, feel free to jump in and help them out, even if it's $10. Every little bit helps. So that would be my way I would encourage you. Maybe later this week or next, I will be able to come and give you some advice in terms of what some of the conservative groups who I trust are saying about some of the races. But until then, have a fantastic, great day, and let's take it to them. This is a fight we're winning. Let's take it to them, and let's wipe them out electorally. With that, take care.